Bonjour mesdames et messieurs, je vous salue tout très chaleureusement et vous souhaite la bienvenue en nom de la Konrad-Adenauer Foundation. Good morning, it is an honor to be here today and I greet and welcome you on behalf of Konrad-Adenauer Foundation together with our colleagues here from Montreal Institute for Global Security, Kyle Matthews, and they will introduce themselves. As KAS Konrad-Adenauer Foundation, we initiated this study consciously and with a view to the most important challenges of our time. It is also continuing this year's focus topic, KAS for Security, and follows on from our highly regarded study together with MIGS on drones, AI and future of defense. As partners and friends in Canada, as a German political foundation, we promote together with aligned think tanks multilateral cooperation and exchange between Canada, Germany, Europe on the most important global challenges of our time, especially in the areas of economic and global security. In uncertain times of change and crisis, in times of protectionism and imperialism, in times of serious-minded challenges for peace, freedom, security, stability, justice, international rules-based order, free speech, human rights, it might be more important than ever to open our eyes to the threats of democracy in which we and our children want to live in the future. Democracy is impossible without security, defending our common shared values against AI dictatorship and countering foreign misinformation, manipulation, wired warfare could be of outstanding importance for peace and freedom. Since 2019, our office here in Canada is drawing attention to the challenges and threats of new emerging technologies like AI, quantum technologies, through different projects between Canada and Germany. AI is one of them. For this occasion, we are proud to launch this publication together with Kylie Matthews and Ms. Marie Lamanche. Readiness, awareness, this is a key challenge for all of us, as we cannot stay silent and observe while some state and non-state actors are weaponizing digital platforms and information ecosystems to shape public opinion. It is our duty to spread awareness against such risks for policymakers and promote transatlantic coordination and transatlantic partnership. What is at stake is the resilience of democratic societies and the credibility of the information space on which our politicians and organizations rely on. Thank you for being present. Wish all the best with our second publication, and I hand over now to Kylie Matthews. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. We're pleased here to be today at the Canadian Parliament to launch Wired for War, looking at how authoritarian states are weaponizing AI against the West. We, through this report, have reviewed expert documents, public reports, news articles, and interviewed top experts around the world about this issue. And what we've come up with is that there's a coordinated, increasing response by authoritarian states, predominantly by China and Russia, working to undermine democracies, undermine our faith in our democratic institutions, and looking to try to collapse or support groups that are opposed to NATO and our joint interest of Canada in the NATO alliance. We call for all Western democracies and NATO to take information warfare seriously. We outline all the different groups that are being supported, both from different authoritarian states and also proxy actors that are engaged in interrupting elections across Europe, engaging in our elections, but also trying to support different activists that are supportive of authoritarian narratives that are against our interest. We've showcased how Russia has in particular used algorithmic bots and AI and generative AI to chip away at any support for Ukraine, to create false narratives, to look at how to destabilize democracies in Europe that will then put in place pro-Russian politicians. So our call in this report is really that as Canada and Germany and NATO members have increased spending for security to 3.5% of their budget, that tanks and weapons alone are not only going to do it. We need to really invest in the capacity to build democratic resilience to foreign information manipulation interference. We need to understand how AI and these new tools are being used against our open societies, and that we need a commitment by governments to build the capacity and capabilities to counter this, because we're beginning to see it really threaten not just our democracies, but our interests and our collective security. So this is a report that outlines how these emerging techs, and I reinstate again how generative AI is being weaponized in real time. We have generative AI that's being identified both by the government of China and the government of Russia as key aspects of their cognitive warfare tools. So we must prepare, respond, and not see this as something out of science fiction, but something that is actually truly happening now as we speak. With that being said, I invite you to visit KAS website or the Montreal Institute for Global Security's website to download the report, to read it. I think you'll find it very interesting with with contemporary facts and reports throughout the report. And I would now like to turn to my colleagues. First, I'd like to invite MIGS Senior Fellow Chris Beall, who's an expert in disinformation campaigns, to tell us about the problem at hand.
Thanks very much, Kyle. And thanks to Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung for the support for this excellent report, and really for their ongoing support for the relationship between Canada and Germany, and for Canada's work in this space. It's really a pleasure to be here talking about the report today. One of the things that comes out in this report that I think really highlighted in the work, the challenge that we see, is understanding the extent to which AI has changed the narrative around disinformation, influence operations, the information campaigns, where there had been a sense in Western democracies and amongst NATO partners that we needed to focus our resilience efforts on capacity building, on media literacy, on sort of thinking about the areas that were being, the groups that were being attacked. And I think what comes very clearly out of the report is the extent to which AI is supercharging the sort of influence operation campaigns, the work that's being done, both in terms of the concrete examples that come out, but also just the overall story being told. And I think the building from this, one of the areas that will be really important for us to continue to focus on is there's so much more of the challenge to influence operations than just elections. For a number of years, democracies have focused on the political sphere as being the area of focus, the area of concern. But what the AI revolution has done, especially recent developments and ongoing developments in generative AI and agentic AI, has been to really target people at an individual level. We've now hit a moment where the collection of data at an individual level really allows for hyper-focused, for very personalized targeting, for sort of an ability to talk to people at an individual space. And the other piece, and the part that I think we don't think about enough in the AI space, is what people use AI for. There's growing recognition that there's a real use of AI for what we might think of as like psychological support, for emotional connection, for knowing people, for talking to people. And when you combine those two things, that we now have this ability to micro-target at the same time as actually really being able to get people where they are, it changes the narrative, it changes the scope of where we're at. And I think what the report does is it really sets the frame for a new way of thinking about and acting on this together. Within that 3.5% target that Kyle was talking about, it's right, we need to think beyond tanks, but we really need to think about what resilience looks like in this age of AI and what that would be. And I think a really key part of this that Canada and and NATO allies are looking at is, and we should be really focusing our efforts on, is how to build that community resilience. So thinking about the funding not just for government, not just for military, but actually for civil society, for the parts of our communities that really touch on and access these community efforts. And I think that's going to be the way we counter this threat posed by AI in this sort of influence operation in that disinformation space. But I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes. Thank you.
I would now like to invite up my colleague, MIGS Fellow Elizabeth Anderson, an expert on cognitive warfare, to join us on stage.
Thank you, Kyle, and appreciate being here. So what I'd like to talk about for cognitive warfare is the idea that your mind is a theater. So in traditional sets of war, especially in Western culture, we think of war as being kinetic forces that are seen on land, sea, air, and in recent decade, cyber and space. But the idea behind cognitive warfare is that your mind is actually a domain just like land, sea, and air have been for generations. And the idea is that our adversaries are well aware of this and are using these tools powered by AI and expanding at a rate that we could not foresee even 5 years ago to attack our citizens in democracies. Democracy depends on the freedom to choose your own future. And it depends on individuals having their own freedom of thought and freedom of choice. And if we have adversaries that are targeting our information space, specifically trying to ensure that our populations go towards their narratives and away from what's actually in our interests as democratic countries, this is just as much of a threat to our democratic values as an actual kinetic attack is on our land. So if we care about protecting our sovereignty, then we must care about protecting the information and cognitive space that is increasingly a space of war being used by our number one and number two adversaries, Russia and China. Government and decision makers have very little awareness of cognitive warfare, and that's understandable given that it is a fairly new expansion of our adversaries' toolkits, but we need to rapidly make that gap less between decision makers and also military personnel at the top of D&D here in Canada, but also our NATO allies and partners, Germany and in Europe. And within NATO, there is recognition of cognitive warfare, but we have challenges to get it to be recognized as a domain within NATO, and therefore it's the responsibility of governments to step up individually to make this known from their own policy standpoint so that democracies can work together and address the causes of war that are threatening their citizens today.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I would like just to make one comment before we turn to the media if there are questions. In this space of dealing with cognitive warfare and dealing with foreign information and interference, we depended, Canada did, of cooperation with the United States. We've seen the last couple of months all the institutions dealing with disinformation, be it civil society, be defunded, government agencies cut. So we have lost, collectively, the West, a lot of the capacity to respond. And the answer is not to say we're going to give up. If the U.S. decides it's not important, that's one thing, but we can act ourselves and build that capacity. So this report is a call for like-minded Western democracies to work together to build the capacity that we need to have nationally and to share and work together as allies. So that being said, I'd like to thank you for attending this press conference. And if there are any questions from the media, we're open to take them in person or via Zoom.
Thank you very much. If there's any questions in the room? No? Okay, great. Thank you. So this concludes today's press conference. Ceci conclut la conférence de presse. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Merci.